Today, the Center for Research and Energy conducts a roundtable. We're talking about the beginning of the work of the electronic system of administering the VAT in energy sector. And do country need a change? Does country need a change? I'd like to tell the speakers that we have only 80 minutes. We'll talk about the energy chain, then we will give the floor to representatives of the Commission, and if our colleagues from the Ministry arrive, then we have invited MPs, but they are at a meeting at the moment. Probably they will be late. Then we give the floor to the experts, and then the media people will have an opportunity to ask everybody present about the topic of our roundtable. So I suggest that we start our conversation with the representatives of an energy delivery company. I give the floor to Tetiana so that she explains what the electronic system of administering the VAT is. Good morning, dear colleagues. First of all, what this system is about. From the 1st of January, all the tax pay slips and all the calculations are done electronically, and from the 1st of February, they are to be compulsory registered in a single register. If previously there was a limit to the sum of VAT, if they were very small, then they could avoid registering. Now they have to do this without any exception. Until the 1st of July, the system worked in a test regime, and from the 1st of July, it is in a working regime, and we have all the positive and negative after effects of this system. We do feel them on our own accounts. First of all, the key element of the registration of tax pay slips in the system is the use of the so-called formula, according to which the enterprise registers tax pay slips only when the sum, if they have the registered tax pay slips of suppliers, or they have to pay cash for the special account of VAT that is open for such needs. If we do not look at the system of the formation of VAT within the country, then this system is rather positive. It does contain possible very good future results, but the essence is in the details. And first of all, as of today, the electric energy enterprises have faced the situation when, according to the law, the suppliers of electric register have to issue tax pay slips for their buyers every 10 days. And after the tax pay slip is issued, it is being put into the declaration on VAT, or it has to be paid according to the monthly declaration. We can register it if, according to the formula, we have either a tax pay slips registered to the benefit of the enterprise, or if we put the money on a special VAT account. And along with this, the fine that the enterprise has to pay if they do not register the tax pay slip issued within 15 days is 10% of the sum of issued but not registered pay slips. And then every 10 days the sum raises until it reaches 40%. So if we follow the logic of the process, then in spite of the cash differences that we have because the buyers have not paid, we would expect from the main supplier of electric energy enterprises, the state enterprise Energorynok, the registration of the tax payslips at least simultaneously with what is requested from the buyers. But they do this only once a month. So all the electric energy enterprises have a huge difference in their cash turnover in order to put money in the account that we have to run. 10 days, 10 days, 10 days, and only then we get the tax payslip that we need. If we take this globally, then the enterprises have to alienate, estrange the money of taxed capital, taxed assets, in order to put this money into the VAT account so that it's the requests of the documentation are observed. So the Energorynok state enterprise does not have an opportunity to pay to the energy generating enterprises. On their part, the energy generating enterprises will have not enough money to prepare for the next heating season. And this is already the situation that affects the entire country. So from our point of view, we do hope that the amendments to the law that are planned will at least synchronize the actions of the suppliers and the wholesale supplier of electricity, because up to 95% of VAT falls to the Energorynok state enterprise, which is a wholesale supplier of electricity. And this will greatly improve this situation that we have now. Thank you. We have a representative from Kyivenergo company. I'd like you to speak on this issue. Good morning, dear colleagues. I want to say that I do support entirely what Tetiana said. The enterprises of energy sector should work simultaneously when they issue and accept tax payslips. As she said, 95% of the tax credit we get from Energorynok state enterprise, and when we do not have an opportunity, we would not like to channel the money that we have to pay to Energorynok to pay for the tax credit and putting the money into an electronic account. And we do see that in the future we should work simultaneously and synchronized with the Energorynok. And how does Energorynok see the situation? Good morning, dear friends. I'd like to underline and to remind you that the state enterprise Energorynok is regulated by the law on the electricity energy, and the agreement or contract between the stakeholders of the energy market of the energy of Ukraine, which are an inalienable part of the contract. The state enterprise Energorynok has always followed strictly the tax legislation, and as of today, until the 1st of July, when the system of electronic administering was working in the testing regime, the state enterprise Energorynok was compiling and registering the tax payslip in the joint state register in a single move. And it did calculate the tax payslips by the end of the month. And the advance payslips were regarded as just advance payments, and they were treated as was being provided for by the tax code. After we got the official position of the State Fiscal Service and the Ministry of Finance, who said the Energorynok enterprise does fall under the action of the 201/4 article of the law on energy market that does provide for the issuing of the pay slips every 10 days. So now we will actually compile and register tax pay slips every 10 days. This is the official position of the state enterprise as for today, as far as the raised issue is concerned. So this is the way how the state enterprise will work in the future. And in general, how the figures look about the VAT. As a result of June, when summing up the data, the state, tax payables to the budget amounts to almost 80 million hryvnia. This is the optimistic option, and this figure is calculated from those calculations that every producer, manufacturer who provide the state enterprise with the entering tax credit will register their tax pay slips on time. However, this does not happen now, and there are manufacturers, generators who cannot, for different reasons, provide for a timely registration. So it may happen so that Energorynok will pay almost 200 million hryvnia. I want 200 million hryvnia to the budget. And in connection with what I've told you earlier, because the system of electronic registration is working to the full scale from the 1st of July, and we cannot admit the sum that can have a minus, the state enterprise, in order to probably have Energo, and that the energy suppliers register their tax pay slips in time so that they can use them to issue obligations to their customers. On the 13th of July, we made calculations of our entering tax pay slips and those that they have to register in the single register, and calculated the sum that was necessary to pay from the current account to the, with a special regime of use, to the current account that can then send the money to the electronic account. The sum was 283 million hryvnia by results of June, and our obligations payables to the budget will be between 80 and 200 million hryvnia, depending on how the manufacturers and generators work on the wholesale market of electricity. As for July and the first 10 days of July, we calculate that the sum of tax pay slips that the or invoices, then the sum is almost 500 million hryvnia. So this means that I understand that as of today, almost 800 hryvnia can be taken out of the turnover. Well, I would not talk about 800 million, well, 500 and 200, 300 million, from which 200 million will be paid to the state budget. If we register every 10 days, then 500 million hryvnia that stockpiled according to the money that we get from Oblenergo will be balanced by the money that will be in the electronic account. And this sum can amount to almost 300 million in the first 10 days. So the sum that you tell, 800 million, I would lower it down to 500. We have
the representatives of Energoatom and Centrenergo, who are the generators of electricity. So what do you think about that? Good afternoon. Today, Energoatom company is generating most of the electricity in Ukraine, and this situation with synchronizing these actions in the energy sector depends a lot on the actions of the companies which generate electricity. We, just like Energomarket, we are state-owned company. We're generating, not selling electricity, but we are following same laws which are the law on energy, all the rules of the market and the tax code. We observe all that. So in accordance with the tax code, we have to issue the tax payment slip in cases it's provided by the law. 201/4 is drafted so that it touches upon only supplies of electricity. But there's an interesting explanation of tax service that all the subjects of energy market are supplies. They sell something similar to electricity. That is what tax administration is writing. But there is clear definition of all the subjects of energy market in the law on energy market, and the same definitions are in section 6 of the tax code. This is still the tax code, and to provide such sort of explanation is quite strange, and we do not know what the tax officers were thinking about when they were explaining that. Synchronizing such actions, unfortunately, is impossible. The only way it's impossible, not because someone doesn't want, but because someone cannot. Energoatom receives money with delay, 2 weeks later than other participants of the market. That is what is in all our documents and all our agreements. And to issue the tax payment slip for certain volume till the first event, which according to the agreement is the execution of the Acceptance Act, we cannot do that because the market had the desire to receive the slips from us in smaller portions, but we are supplying several types of electricity because we have different sources of generation, 3 minimum. We had 4 before, and we need to issue the technical acts according to the time frame that someone requires to do. It is practically impossible now. So we were issuing our tax payment slips after the act was executed, and we can do it only this way. And we don't have any registration in the register. If we make some document and if there is a mistake, the document will not be registered. There is a draft developed by the Ministry of Finance. It wasn't developed only by the Ministry of Finance, it's with the participation of the electric energy company. And finally, the tax service, the Ministry of Finance, realized that this norm is discriminatory, because all the countries issuing these documents after the first event, and only the suppliers of electricity have to do it once every decade. But that is what happened during one meeting in December last year. So we explained to the tax service all our rules, and in the result we have this item which was not there till the 1st of January. For the representatives of legislative initiatives, well, they eventually realized that that is discrimination, and they corrected that. One thing they failed to register was, well, because the draft was submitted till on the 30th of June, and we believe that tomorrow it is in the agenda, but how it will be voted for, we do not know. Every MP votes with his or her heart, and we will see what's happening. There are many such issues. All these things were prepared, and they were prepared by the specialists, and representatives of business are people who we can listen to, but we have to make our own decision. But they finally started listening to that. The group worked for more than a month there. But how it will happen, we will see tomorrow when the voting takes place. And the MPs can change it as well, and treasury accounts, these are money in the budget. But as to the formula, my colleague in the beginning of our meeting did not tell you everything about the formula. The formula has not just tax liabilities and received tax credit, but it also has several more interesting indicators. Payment of VAT at the customs, so-called overdraft, and overdraft is a bonus from the state to fair taxpayers who pay, to diligent taxpayers. They take the average monthly figure of such payment, and it's added to the formula and that allows you to register the document. In our company, this is more than 200 million. When registering the tax slip or tax bill of which is not so big, well, the formula allows us not to add to the account. As to the delay with payments, after several meetings that took place in our ministry and NERC, well, they started talking about synchronizing a month ago, when everyone realized that finally we will have to administer. We have what we have. And any delay with money transferred to treasury account is something which depends on the decision of the NERC. If NERC KP changes the algorithm of distribution of the money, then the subjects of the market will have an ability to receive money to add to this account. If not, all the money will be on a special account and there will be no movement. And this account in the treasury will not be replenished, and they will have to either find money elsewhere or to pay fines. Last week we were trying to reach some understanding with the representatives of the Ministry of Finance and Tax Administration, but they regulated the very regulated sector. It's so regulated that the money is on the account and no one can touch it without the instructions of NERC. But they created a new corridor for us. This is the situation, but the situation in the energy sector today, the money which is in the account shouldn't be there. The money should work to prepare for the autumn and winter period. The money is working. The money cannot leave the market, the account, even to treasury account directly. This can happen only after this is distributed by the NERC, after, well, distributing company gets some profit, generator receives money for the electricity sold, and the movement on this account is permanent. Every day, every hour, the money is moving in and out. No one's accumulating money, and NERC is sitting and looking what to do with the money. There are no extra money in energy sector. 27 billion is the debt of the consumers. There could be no extra money. 27 billion, that's 2 months of work of the whole sector. What about Energo? Any proposals? Energo? We can add that unlike energy supplying company of Energorynok, Energo market, the generators have contacts with the suppliers of gas and coal, with other counteragents who are not in a very good financial situation, and we see that our agents cannot register the tax credit, and because the activities of thermal generation was not balanced, the Energo has also debts on paying VAT. So basically we have proposals, we send them in letters as to distribution of debt for July and April, and about separate accounting of that, so that the generators, I know that Donbas Energo has similar problems, so that allows us to register the tax slips, and this way to execute our commitments that we have. Thank you.
So if people from the energy sector have clarified what the electronic system is and what the effects of its use may be, then I ask the representatives of the Ministry and the Commission to comment on this and to report whether we will in the future continue to work without synchronization in our sector or in another way. Good morning. I'd like to say that you know that the Commission regulates relations on the wholesale market, and this pertains not only to economic but also to financial indicators. And this, of course, means that we are involved in distribution of the money as well. And there's a lot of statements that the sector is over-regulated, so the changes to the tax code that are active today already have a nature of a systemic problem. But I'd like to separate them in two. Part one, the fulfillment of the tax code, which is active today, and the Commission does have a lot of questions relating to, as my colleague said, the energy sector, the clarification by the fiscal services on how the norm of Article 2014 works. And here the Commission has to understand clearly who, as of today, is where, and who is going to be the main payer of this money. Because if you read the norm of the tax code, then only energy suppliers and wholesale supplier, state enterprise Energorynok, may be payers, and the generators cannot make it to this list because the legislation does define the term generator, manufacturer, also supplier and wholesale supplier. So here we have to understand clearly that the clarification issued by the fiscal service only confuses us today, as everyone is talking about the synchronized issuing of tax pay slips, but there's a continuous process in the energy sector, so I don't think that there are problems with paying your taxes. And the second issue, or second problem, is the draft law, which we have not mentioned today, but it is still there. And if it is adopted, it is going to be a problem. First of all, because these norms of law will be enacted, the energy will see the after effects. And we have calculated that even over June alone, additional money was eroded from the turnover, 200 million hryvnia, from, first of all, generating companies. We do not introduce amendments into this tax code, then during July we'll get almost 1.5 billion hryvnia, which will be extracted from the turnover of the manufacturers. And we have to understand very well that we're talking here about 1.7 billion hryvnia taken away from the turnover of electricity generators. We have to prepare for winter now, and we are talking about additional 2 million hryvnia to buy coal, but here is the additional burden of 1.5 billion that is being taken from this sector to just declare this money. We have to understand that this money will be lying on this account, and most of them will be on the account of state enterprise Energorynok, and they will be written off within 18 months. Because the chief accountant of Energorynok said that they have payables of almost 1.5 billion, so if we calculate how it will be paid, then it will be almost 200 million hryvnia a month, which won't be used by the energy sector. We have addressed the Minister of Finance with a request to provide a clear explanation about the Article 2014 to understand who has to fill this account and this budget, to explain who the taxpayer in this case is, and we have to raise the issue even if the law 2973 is adopted. While it is, before it is signed, we still lose this 1.5 billion hryvnia. And we have to raise the issue that we are provided an opportunity to develop a mechanism in which we can snatch that money from the account and to give it back to generators who will be preparing to winter, because the sector does need this money urgently and very badly. So I do support all the suggestions that this draft law should be adopted. Secondly, we have to prepare proposals on the mechanism of freeing this money from this special account before the heating season starts. And this money should be sent to manufacturers so that they prepare for winter. Ms. Olena. Hello, everybody. We know about the situation in the ministry does control and does work with the companies that are there in this energy sector. And I'd like to draw your attention, or rather I'd like to answer to the attention paid by Oblenergo, besides the problem of washing out the money from the turnover part, although we really are not paid to the full extent. It's something like 70% every month, and companies do not get enough money to pay for their existing obligations. The problem is not just with the nuclear generation, but also with the coal generation. We know that there's a problem with coal in Ukraine now, and we are thinking about how we extract this brand G that is being produced by state enterprises, how to pay salaries to the miners, where we get brand A or AB to provide for the work of the stations. We understand that in order to buy coal abroad, we have to use prepayment, we have to have some live money, some cash. We take part in every meeting. We are representatives from the ministry in the working group in the parliament, the council of market operators. We feel the pulse of what's going on. We had several conferences at the ministry to discuss the issue with wholesale suppliers, with the manufacturers. The National Commission was there in order to find the understanding what methods and what ways we should use. And at the moment we asked the companies to help us to form a mathematical model of what the effect will be from the extraction of coal or from the import of coal, and then with the consumer, and to see where we are not synchronized and where the money will be washed out and where the money will lie idly on those accounts. We support wholeheartedly the Law 237A. We sent letters of support to the Parliament and to the Ministry of Finance. We would like to take part in the work of the Tax Committee of the Parliament about the exceptions for the electricity sector that are there in the tax code are not very right if we take into account the situation in the region, and that our MPs vote as soon as possible in order to delay this question, to regulate it as much as possible. And of course all the models that we will formulate, we will discuss at round tables about how we see the way out of the situation. We will send our conclusions to the parliament, to the ministry, and to other bodies. We won't stay aside. We will gather and try to solve the issues that will be raised soon. So now the main suggestion to go to find a way out of the situation is to adopt the law, the draft of which is in the parliament, and I understand that the ministry has addressed the parliament already. Yes, we are in favor of adopting this law, and very urgently. We actually hope that it would be voted on the 1st of July. We know that this Friday the session ends, and if this law is not adopted this week, we will be thrown back into very uncomfortable conditions for quite a long time. Yes, we know about the 1.5 billion sum. We are talking about this. This is a huge sum, and our letters are in the Ministry of Finance and in the committee of the Parliament, and we took part in sittings. We are never far. We do support all this, and we do hope that a concerted work will lead us to success, to justice and result. We have here the Vice President of the Energy Association of Ukraine, and what is your opinion? Hello everybody present, almost everybody. Almost every main decisions and explanations were voiced before me. I'd like to underline, however, that there are two sides to this problem, and the first is a general economic situation. Even without the second part of Article 201.4, the sector will lose turnover money, just like all the other industries and sectors. And this is linked to the fact that the money is mobilized to this account a bit earlier than then have to be paid as a tax to the budget. And then there's a mechanism that a conscientious payer of taxes with their money are responsible for their bad payers, or those who do not want or do not have a possibility or opportunity to pay their taxes. And as the state enterprise Energorynok told us, we understand that this is not just because they do not want to do this, or because some manufacturers have not registered their tax payslip. They just don't have enough money in the flow. And the general after effect of this law and this order is that the results are going to become even worse, and they will lose even more money. And energy sector was unlucky two times. First of all, the financial state is very tense. 87% is not paid, and this amounts to 8 billion hryvnia, which means that manufacturers have not gone 8 billion hryvnia within 6 months, and this means that we are on the edge. And as a result of law 201.4, as a member of the Commission said, we are still facing the risk to lose 1.5 billion hryvnia in the way that they will be mobilized at the state treasury, but this money will not work for the economy in general. And this problem can really be solved because the draft law 2711A tabled by the Cabinet of Ministers helps solve this issue, as they remove the norm of paying every 10 days. But the money that will inevitably stay in this account, and that depends on when the law acquires action, but this may happen until this month ends or in the first half of August. There should be an additional clause that everybody who added turnover money from their cash flow to their special accounts to fulfill the demands of 201.4, they should be given their money back. This is not just tax obligations, this is just the money taken out of their cash flow. And the last thing that I want to say, there's such a economy adage that we sometimes see as an axiom. There are enterprises, the enterprises are killed not by loss, but by a lack of cash flow. Everybody who worked in the real sector knows this. You can have income and profit, but if you don't have cash flow, then you cannot work normally, and this is the direct way to bankruptcy. So I think that in view of a mutual understanding that we found with the Cabinet of Ministers and the Minister of Finance, we have to urgently adopt this draft law 237A, and of course with the amendment about paying back the money taken away from the cash flow to those enterprises that actually pay them. Thank you.
I hope that the MPs who are not here, they probably are now introducing this norm to the draft, which possibly today will be considered by the Committee on Fuel and Energy of Verkhovna Rada. Let us hope that this norm will be introduced there. Anyone else? Does anyone else would like to say something as to the action of such thing as the system of electronic administering of VAT? The norm was introduced by the authors of that idea, and such authors present it as our big achievement in closing the so-called tax gaps in the budget. This was the first time in the world when that was introduced, referring to directives or other instructions of donors. That is nonsense, because the only condition that IMF had is the reform of the tax structure, the reform of electronic administering of VAT. It has such an administering, it's not just administering, but it's introducing electronic tax bills or other electronic documents. And third thing, introducing so-called cash machines, which that norm was introduced into the code, but that norm was successfully overcome, and two countries had something similar in their history. That was Bulgaria, and the system worked there for half a year and less, and in Azerbaijan. And this system has been was working in Azerbaijan also, and they have such a method. I receive money, I pay taxes, and same way I send money to that account in the treasury, because I have this money. In our country, the first event, whether you have money or not, but you have to fill in the account. And that is true not just in the energy sector, in the economy in general. This is not the fact that in some supply chain someone will not have money to fill in the account, then they will either borrow them from the bank or will borrow from some of their counter agents. They will not pay to someone. But there's one thing which is good, it's the ideas of some of the MPs, several of them are members of that tax committee, and that was back in April and May, that they had to either delay the term of payment because the human factor is still present. When these servers of the state register is broken from time to time, no one negates that. And in the draft there is a norm which we eventually managed to explain to the legislator. There are cases when the tax payer cannot register the tax bill because of certain circumstances which do not depend on him, like there is some breakage in the server, the taxpayer does not see his formula, cannot register anything, and it's not his he who's to be blamed in that. And there are two ways out of the situation: to delay the term in half a year or do nothing. 2 weeks are left now. We are talking to tax administration, tax inspectors, and we set the different term, which is today. And I have to finish on this optimistic note. If there are no more people who would like to say anything, I would like to request mass media to ask questions on our topic. Who are you asking the question? I would like to ask you about what you mentioned. If the system is not finalized, why is it launched? Do you want me to answer? There is Mr. Nasirov. And the second question, the energy sector suffer. The generators supply them, submit them every month. How to correct that situation, how to find the way out of this situation. I will answer your question. This is not the first question asked by UN agency to Energatom, and it doesn't refer to the activities of that company. So you have many people there, I can tell you the name. There were many questions. It was about activities of the distribution and energy market, and the question was asked to Nidashkovsky. But it's not up to him to comment on the activity of others, because that system has been introduced for the first time. In any case, it's very fresh. And they have not been working. They worked like the taxpayers were registering the tax bills, and they were filling in the account only if the tax is paid to the budget. And this part of testing, according to which they had to fill in the account in accordance to the law, like it's done now, this did not work. It started working, the test regime started from the 1st of July. The system wasn't working, and to give any assessment that it will work so well is nonsense. Why they introduce it? Because they took a commitment that they will find anyone. And they changed the head of the tax administration, and they say that everything will be fine. So there are some details there, but that is what it was about in the very beginning. Our consumers will not pay to us fully. There is the Energoatom came to tax administration. They had to pay 36% of annual because the banks do not give us money. They don't give money to they give money to few, and if they give, the conditions are very, very strange. That's the life. I answered your first question. Right, and the second one, again. It's about what you were saying, that this non-synchronization led to the fact that the Commission has introduced some changes, and yesterday there was 200 million hryvnias 200 million hryvnias went to fill in this account, and that is just about about July. If the system starts working, and it should start working, then the mechanism is there. There is an algorithm, and as I mentioned, about 1.5 billion hryvnias will be washed out additionally. Any questions? Once you have no questions, maybe you will say something in the end. As it has been mentioned, the new system of administering, electronic system of administering, introduced some problems to the energy sector, and all those who are present, they expect from Verkhovna Rada that the draft law will be approved, the draft law which is registered, which will correct the situation. But it is important immediately to introduce into this draft law changes which would return the money that will be washed out of the economy of the companies at the moment when the law wasn't working. That is what is planned to be passed. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for your work, for the information you provided, and our next briefing will take place in